The flashbulbs were merciless that night. You could almost hear them snapping like firecrackers. Each burst of light, freezing 1 second of a love story that no longer felt real. Meghan Markle stood in front of the cameras, her smile a polished weapon, her posture sculpted for the lenses. But something was off. Something you could feel before you could even see it. Because just a few steps away, Prince Harry's expression wasn't one of affection. It was exhaustion, cold, distant, and seconds away from boiling over. And then it happened. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Right there, under the blinding lights of the Project Healthy Minds Gala red carpet, as Meghan adjusted her gown and waited for Harry to take his place beside her, he turned. Not toward her, but away. Without a word. Without a glance back. Just gone. The crowd gasped. Photographers froze, confused whether to keep shooting or lower their cameras. For a moment, no one breathed. And Meghan, caught mid-smile, looked like someone whose entire performance had just fallen apart in front of the world. How could something so small, a walk-off during a photo op, ignite global chaos within minutes? How could one silent moment expose everything that's been simmering beneath the surface of their marriage for years? Because this wasn't just a red carpet. This was supposed to be their redemption, their comeback. The Sussexes' first major public appearance since whispers of tension, PR blunders, and emotional distance began dominating the headlines again. The Project Healthy Minds Gala was their moment to remind the world why they mattered, to reclaim control of their image after months of quiet humiliation. But instead, it became the moment the illusion shattered. And here's where it gets even more complicated. This wasn't just a random public spat or an awkward photo moment. What insiders later revealed was that this incident had been building for weeks. That Harry's walkout wasn't spontaneous. It was the breaking point of a storm that had been brewing behind palace walls, private jets, and perfectly rehearsed smiles. Let's rewind. The Project Healthy Minds Gala wasn't just another Hollywood event. It was deeply personal. For Harry, it represented his lifelong mission, advocating for mental health awareness, breaking the stigma that haunted his own royal upbringing. For Meghan, it was a stage, a spotlight, another opportunity to remind the world that she wasn't just a duchess, but a brand. The world's cameras were ready. The media invites had been sent. The stylists, publicists, photographers, all perfectly aligned for one purpose: to make the Sussexes look untouchable again. But that night, something changed. Some witnesses said Harry seemed distracted from the moment he arrived. He barely smiled. He kept looking away when reporters shouted their names. And Meghan, ever the actress, tried to pull him into her rhythm, guiding his movements, adjusting his stance, whispering instructions like she'd done 1,000 times before. But Harry didn't play along. You could see it. In his eyes. In the stiffness of his shoulders. The man who once defended her against the full force of the British tabloids looked like he didn't want to be there at all. And here's the haunting irony. The event was about mental health. About being honest, vulnerable, and authentic. Yet there they were, performing a scene that screamed everything but authenticity. Viewers caught the contradiction instantly. Online clips started going viral within minutes. Harry looks miserable. Meghan's smile looks forced. Something's wrong. The internet smelled blood, and the more Meghan tried to hold the moment together, the more fragile it looked. But what really fueled the fire were the behind-the-scenes whispers that emerged later. Allegedly, before stepping onto that carpet, Harry and Meghan had a quiet but intense disagreement. Something about media positioning, who would speak first to the press, or how they would handle the photo lineup. Harry, sources claimed, wanted to keep things low-key, short, simple, minimal posing. Meghan wanted the opposite. More exposure, more coverage, more presence. You see, to Meghan, appearances weren't just vanity, they were survival. She understood that every photo, every angle, every smile could rewrite the narrative. She'd done it before. But Harry? He was tired of it. Tired of pretending. Tired of feeling like a prop in a photo shoot for a life that didn't feel his own anymore. And so, when the cameras started flashing and the familiar tension rose, Harry broke character. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was silent, simple, devastating. He turned away, walked off, left Meghan stranded in the spotlight she'd been fighting so hard to control. Think about that for a moment. How many times had we seen Meghan command a red carpet like it was her stage? How many times had she taken Harry's hand, pulled him into frame, corrected his posture, whispered cues? This time, no cue could save it. No hand could reach far enough to pull him back. And maybe, deep down, that's what makes the moment so haunting. It wasn't an explosion. It was a quiet surrender. The footage spread like wildfire. TikTok users slowed it down, frame by frame. Twitter, or rather, X, erupted with disbelief. Memes flooded the internet. Harry rage quits the red carpet. Meghan's smile glitch. Royal meltdown at mental health gala. Within hours, news outlets from London to Los Angeles had published think pieces dissecting what it all meant. And yet, the truth behind that moment wasn't just about one event. It was about everything leading up to it. The fatigue, the pressure, the emotional whiplash of living under a microscope while trying to appear flawless. For years, Meghan had been accused of controlling Harry's image, of scripting every move, of steering their public narrative like a Hollywood production. Whether that's fair or not, it created an image of imbalance, of one spouse thriving under attention while the other shrank from it. And that imbalance finally tipped over that night. What's striking is how the silence between them spoke louder than any scandal ever could. There was no yelling, no visible argument, just detachment. Meghan posed. Harry disappeared. But here's where the story gets even more intriguing. Those who were actually at the event said what happened off camera was even more dramatic. Witnesses claimed Meghan's composure cracked the second Harry was gone, that she whispered sharply to her team, motioning them to follow him, that her smile faltered only when she thought no one was watching. But everyone was. Even from across the room, even through the chaos of flashbulbs and chatter, people noticed the sudden energy shift. The Duchess, who always seemed in control, looked, for once, completely powerless. Was it humiliation, anger, fear, or all three colliding in a single second? We don't know. But we do know this. Meghan Markle has always built her brand around control, around knowing the script before anyone else. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she didn't have one. And what about Harry? What was going through his mind when he walked off? Some sources later suggested he wasn't storming off at all, that he was simply overwhelmed, needing space, stepping away for air. But if that's true, why didn't he come back right away? Why did event coordinators scramble to fill the gap? Why did Meghan look so lost without him? Because sometimes, even silence has a story. And that night, Harry's silence screamed louder than any headline. It screamed of frustration, of burnout, of a man who once thought he'd escaped the toxicity of palace life, only to find himself in a new kind of cage, one built not of rules, but of image. Imagine how that must have felt. The cameras he once blamed for his mother's pain were now his daily reality again. Only this time, it wasn't the crown behind them. It was his own wife's team. That's not to say he doesn't love her, or that she doesn't love him. But love, when turned into a performance, starts to lose its warmth. It becomes choreography. And when one partner refuses to dance, the entire illusion falls apart. So there they were, on a night meant to promote healing, mental wellness, and unity, silently unraveling in front of the entire world. And you can almost feel the irony dripping through every pixel of that footage. Because if Project Healthy Minds was supposed to be about ending stigma and embracing vulnerability, then Harry and Meghan accidentally became the perfect, tragic case study. The perfect couple, cracking under pressure. The perfect smile, masking chaos. The perfect partnership, fractured by pride and exhaustion. But here's the haunting truth. That moment wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Because when Harry walked off that carpet, he didn't just walk away from Meghan's side. He walked away from the script, from the illusion, from the control. And what came next would make the red carpet look like a calm before the storm. Because backstage, away from the cameras, behind the velvet ropes, the real story began to unfold. And what those who were there said happened next would send shockwaves through the Sussex camp and the entire royal narrative. But before we get there, ask yourself this. What makes someone walk away from the one person they once swore to protect from the world? Is it anger or heartbreak? Maybe both. And when the world finds out what truly happened behind those curtains that night, everything we thought we knew about the Sussexes may never look the same again. Because that red carpet wasn't just another photo op. It was a moment of truth. And truth, once exposed, can never be unseen. What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started like any other glamorous night in Hollywood. Cameras flashing, journalists jostling, the hum of anticipation thick in the air. But if you looked closely, if you really paid attention, you could sense something unusual about the atmosphere surrounding Meghan Markle and Prince Harry at the Project Healthy Minds Gala. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't love. It was tension, subtle, but sharp enough to slice through the noise. The red carpet was drenched in light. Celebrities posed with effortless charm, publicists whispered instructions, and photographers shouted names like they were calling royalty, which, of course, they were. When Meghan and Harry arrived, the crowd erupted. It had been months since the couple's last major joint public appearance. The world had questions. The tabloids had predictions. And Meghan, ever the strategist, had plans. But this time, her plans didn't go as expected. From the moment they stepped out of the car, body language analysts, yes, they were already watching, noticed it. Meghan's hand reached out. Harry's didn't move. She smiled brightly, the kind of Hollywood perfect smile that could melt glass. Harry's eyes were fixed on something distant, almost vacant. It was as though his body was there, but his spirit was already somewhere else entirely. Let's break down what actually happened, step by step. When Meghan first appeared, she was radiant. Dressed in a sleek, cream-colored gown with understated jewelry, she projected calm sophistication. Cameras loved her, they always did. She waved gracefully, adjusted her hair, and waited for Harry to join her. But Harry lingered behind. His suit was immaculate, but his posture wasn't. He hesitated, just for a second, but enough for everyone watching to feel it. "Harry, over here," shouted one photographer. "Look this way, Duke and Duchess." Harry glanced up, nodded slightly, but didn't move closer to Meghan. Instead, he turned toward a nearby event organizer, muttered something no one could quite hear, and briefly rubbed his temples. That was the first sign. Then came the second. Meghan motioned for him to come stand beside her, lightly lifting her hand, a subtle cue she'd used countless times before at previous events. Usually, he'd smile, take his place, and let her take the lead. But not this time. This time he paused. His expression tightened, and for a fleeting moment, you could see the frustration, the silent conversation happening between two people who had clearly rehearsed this dance too many times. The flashes intensified. Harry just won together. "Look up, Duchess, beautiful." Meghan did what she does best. She smiled. Perfectly. Effortlessly. But that smile didn't reach her eyes. Because in that split second, Harry took a step back. And then another. And before anyone could understand what was happening, he turned and began walking away. The crowd gasped. Even the photographers, professionals trained to capture chaos without flinching, froze for a heartbeat. You could almost hear the silence break through the clicking lenses. What was happening? Why was Harry leaving? Was it an argument? Stage fright? A mental health moment gone wrong? No one knew. But one thing was certain, Meghan knew this was bad. For a woman whose entire brand depended on visual control, the perfect pose, the perfect smile, the perfect narrative. Harry walking out mid-photo was the equivalent of a live bomb going off. But here's what most people didn't see. Meghan's reaction. For a split second, her smile collapsed. It wasn't dramatic, just a flicker of real emotion that slipped past her polished exterior. Her eyes darted toward the direction Harry had gone. Her lips parted as if to call him back, but no sound came out. And then, she recovered. Instantly, the smile returned. The hand wave resumed. The Duchess was back in character, but everyone watching knew something had cracked. From that moment, social media lit up like wildfire. Within minutes, clips from multiple angles began circulating online. Twitter users slowed down the footage, adding commentary and speculation. "Harry's had enough," one user wrote. "He's done playing Meghan's game," another commented. Some fans defended the couple, insisting Harry had simply gone to greet someone or check logistics. But others weren't convinced. The viral clip was dissected like a crime scene. Every blink, every gesture, every shift in body language became evidence in an ongoing public trial of their marriage. And the internet, as always, took sides. Some saw Meghan as the manipulative mastermind who'd finally pushed Harry too far. Others saw her as the victim of a husband emotionally withdrawing under pressure. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. Something was deeply wrong. And yet, this wasn't an isolated moment. This was the culmination of months of visible disconnect. The distance wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Since the release of their Netflix documentary and the controversial interviews that followed, Harry had seemed quieter, more withdrawn. Meghan, in contrast, doubled down on her public persona, fashion events, partnerships, and subtle power plays that kept her in the headlines. At the Project Healthy Minds Gala, those two realities finally collided. It's almost poetic. The event's mission was to promote mental health and authentic conversation. And here were two of its biggest advocates publicly crumbling under the weight of their own image. But the real twist? Insiders say this wasn't spontaneous. According to sources close to the event, the couple had already been arguing backstage before the red carpet began. The disagreement reportedly centered around timing, who would speak to the press, and how long they'd pose together. Meghan, always conscious of optics, wanted to ensure they maximized exposure. Harry, on the other hand, wanted to get through it quickly without turning it into what he allegedly called a media circus. And when Meghan insisted on just one more shot, that was apparently the final straw. One source said Harry muttered something like, "I'm not doing this again." Then he stepped aside. Another insider described the moment bluntly. It wasn't anger. It was fatigue. He's done pretending. Think about that. A man who once walked away from an entire monarchy because of media pressure, now walking away from the woman he left it all for because of media pressure. It's tragic, really. And yet, Meghan's instincts didn't fail her. She knew cameras were rolling. She knew millions would see whatever she did next. So she stayed. She kept posing. She smiled until her jaw must have ached. Because in her world, image isn't just everything. It's survival. But what she couldn't control were the whispers starting to spread through the crowd. Attendees nudged one another, event staff exchanged uneasy glances, and journalists began texting their editors before the event even began. Something's up between them. It wasn't long before Meghan realized Harry wasn't coming back, at least not right away. She quickly shifted gears, greeting other attendees, laughing at jokes that barely landed, and pretending nothing had happened. But beneath the surface, the damage was done. One photographer later said, "You could see her eyes scanning for him between shots. Every time the flash went off, she glanced to her left, like she expected him to reappear. But he didn't. And that's when Meghan's smile began to harden, not in sadness, but in control. It was the look of someone who knew the narrative was slipping and was already planning how to get it back. What's haunting about that footage is how human it is. We've all seen celebrities fake a smile. But this wasn't just fake. It was fractured. You could almost see the emotion leak through, like a glass surface beginning to crack under too much pressure. The online reactions became merciless. Some mocked her, others pitied her. But everyone felt the same electric discomfort watching it unfold. The feeling that they were witnessing something deeply private, something that wasn't supposed to be seen. And that discomfort only grew when backstage witnesses began leaking details. They claimed that moments after walking off, Harry disappeared into a side hallway where he was seen talking to an event coordinator, visibly frustrated. Meghan's team followed soon after, whispering urgently, trying to manage the fallout before the story spread. But it was too late. The cameras had already done their job. By the time Meghan rejoined Harry inside the venue, the damage was irreversible. They had come to promote unity, and instead became the headline of division. It's strange how quickly the world can turn on a single moment. Hours before, they were being praised for their advocacy, their grace, their message. Hours after, they were trending for all the wrong reasons. And maybe, just maybe, that's the irony of their entire relationship. Every time they try to control the narrative takes control of them. Because if there's one thing Meghan Markle has never been able to conquer, it's authenticity. And if there's one thing Prince Harry can't seem to escape, it's performance. So when those two forces collided on that red carpet, the explosion was inevitable. And what makes this story even more shocking? The red carpet walkout was just the beginning. Because what happened after Harry left, the whispers, the confrontation, the emotional unraveling backstage, was far more intense than anyone realized. That's where the true story begins. Because once the cameras stopped flashing and the glamour gave way to tension, The Sussexes' carefully crafted image began to unravel in ways that would make even their harshest critics stop and wonder. Had we all just watched the moment their partnership finally cracked? But what came next behind those curtains, the looks, the words, the silence, would reveal just how deep that crack had become. And no one, not even Meghan herself, could stop what happened next. Because as the world replayed the viral clip on loop, Meghan was about to face something far more humiliating than public scrutiny. She was about to lose control of her own story. And that's where everything truly began to fall apart. What happened behind that velvet rope would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It's the smile that haunted the internet. That split-second expression caught between control and collapse. Meghan Markle's face frozen mid-performance, her trademark composure slipping just long enough for the world to see what she didn't want them to. That smile, the one meant to charm the cameras, told a story all on its own. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But that night, Meghan's smile was worth 1,000 headlines. It's strange how something so familiar, a simple, practiced grin, can suddenly feel foreign when sincerity vanishes behind it. For years, Meghan's smile had been her armor. It disarmed critics, softened controversies, and rewrote narratives. But on that red carpet, it betrayed her. When Harry turned and walked away, Meghan didn't flinch at first. She held her pose, shoulders square, chin lifted, lips curved in that perfect Hollywood arc. But then came the flicker, the smallest crack. Her eyes darted toward the space Harry had occupied seconds earlier. Empty now, except for the awkward shuffle of photographers who didn't know whether to keep shooting or stop. Her smile trembled, just for a moment, and that was all it took. The internet caught it, zoomed in, replayed it in slow motion. Millions watched her face transition, from warmth to confusion, from control to panic, and back to performance. It was the blink of an eye, but the meaning was unmistakable. Meghan Markle, the woman who built an empire on image, had just lost control of hers. But to understand that smile, that single, haunting expression, we have to look beyond the surface. Because this wasn't just a reaction to Harry walking off. This was the culmination of everything that's been building between them for years. The exhaustion of maintaining perfection. The tension of living a double life. The private couple cracking under the pressure of their public fairy tale. And in that one moment, the truth leaked through. Witnesses said the mood on the carpet changed instantly. What had been electric anticipation became uncomfortable silence. Photographers exchanged confused looks. Publicists gestured nervously. Meghan's team, standing just beyond the velvet rope, stiffened as they realized what had just happened. Still, she didn't leave. She stayed put, smiling, posing, pretending. But even pretending has limits. People who were close enough to see her up close described something chilling, that her smile never reached her eyes after that point. It was mechanical, robotic, like she was running on autopilot. One reporter later wrote, "I've covered Meghan for years. I've seen her perform under pressure, but this was different. She wasn't just performing for the cameras. She was performing for herself." And that's when the whispers started. Did they fight? Is Harry okay? Why did she keep posing? What makes the moment so unsettling is that Meghan seemed caught between two instincts, fight or perform. And she chose the latter. Because Meghan Markle doesn't show weakness, not in public, not ever. But inside, something was unraveling. Let's rewind a few seconds to the moment Harry disappeared behind the curtain. Meghan was left standing alone. The flashes intensified, as if the photographers sensed blood in the water. One shouted her name again, "Meghan, over here." And she turned automatically, flashing that same impeccable grin. But then her lips parted, just barely. And if you look closely, really closely, you can see her inhale sharply, her jaw tighten. It's the kind of micro-expression that only slips through when you're trying desperately to suppress something bigger. Was it anger, embarrassment, or heartbreak? Maybe all three. Body language experts later dissected the footage in detail. One noted, her posture remains upright, but her hand movements become tense. She starts clasping her fingers in front of her, a self-soothing gesture. Her smile freezes longer than usual, which often indicates stress or discomfort. Others notice something even more telling. She stopped making eye contact with the photographers. Instead, her gaze kept flicking toward the direction Harry had gone, as if her mind was split, half performing, half panicking. And yet, in the midst of that chaos, she still managed to look radiant. The paradox of Meghan Markle, the woman who could crumble internally and still look flawless doing it. But the truth is, that smile wasn't just about saving face. It was survival. Meghan has always understood that public perception is currency. One wrong expression, one visible crack, can cost everything: brand deals, endorsements, invitations, influence. So she smiled. Not for Harry, not even for the cameras, but for control. Because if she could smile, maybe she could still convince herself that she hadn't lost it. But the irony? That very smile, the thing meant to protect her, became the weapon that destroyed her image. Within hours, screenshots of that frozen grin were circulating online. Commentators called it the smile that lied. Memes spread comparing it to her infamous courtroom expressions, her Oprah interview smirks, her carefully posed Netflix scenes. People started to say the quiet part out loud, that Meghan's expressions always seemed rehearsed, that her emotions never felt organic. And now, in the one moment where she actually was breaking, no one believed it. Because when you've trained the world to see you as a performance, the day you're genuine, they'll still think it's an act. And that's exactly what happened. Even sympathetic outlets struggled to defend her. The narrative had shifted overnight, from royal rebel turned humanitarian to woman losing control of the illusion. But what really stung wasn't the memes or the headlines. It was the betrayal of her own instincts. For years, Meghan's greatest weapon had been her emotional intelligence, her ability to read a room, anticipate reactions, and steer the narrative before it turned against her. But on that night, she misread everything. She thought she could outshine Harry's absence by staying composed. But what the world saw was someone standing alone, pretending nothing was wrong. And that image was devastating. And it wasn't just the audience who noticed. Event staff later described the atmosphere as tense but silent. One of them recalled, "She stood there smiling for almost a full minute after he left. It felt like forever. You could tell she didn't know what to do. Everyone around her was frozen. No one wanted to approach her. No one wanted to make it worse." Finally, her publicist stepped in, whispering something into her ear. Meghan nodded, adjusted her posture, and began moving down the carpet again, still posing, still smiling, as though nothing had happened. But her team knew this was bad. They were already drafting statements in their heads, trying to predict how the footage would look online, what headlines would come, how to spin it before the narrative took off. Except the narrative had already taken off, and it wasn't in their favor. By the time Meghan reached the end of the red carpet, the damage was done. She gave a brief wave, disappeared behind the curtain, and according to eyewitnesses, her entire demeanor changed the moment the cameras couldn't see her anymore. Her smile dropped completely. Her hands went to her face. She turned sharply to her aides. Words were exchanged, quiet but clipped. A reporter nearby claimed to have overheard something along the lines of, "He can't keep doing this." It wasn't rage. It was panic, because she knew that the story wasn't just about an awkward moment anymore. It was about control slipping through her fingers. And that terrified her more than any criticism ever could. What made this all the more tragic is that Meghan had orchestrated the entire evening to be a triumph. She'd chosen her gown carefully, subtle but elegant. She'd planned the sequence of press interviews. She'd even personally approved the photographers who would have front-row access. Every detail was designed to re-establish her image after months of negative headlines. And then, in an instant, it all fell apart. The woman who had mastered optics couldn't manage her own. And somewhere in that chaos, the audience, the same global audience that once adored her, stopped seeing a fairy tale and started seeing a fracture. One fan tweet summed it up perfectly. That wasn't a smile. That was someone trying not to cry. But here's the cruel irony. Even if Meghan had broken down in tears, the world might not have believed her either. Because by then, her emotional currency was spent. And as the evening went on, her smile became her prison. She couldn't drop it, couldn't escape it. The cameras were everywhere. Even inside the gala, photographers captured her laughing at moments that didn't seem funny, nodding through speeches while Harry sat stiff beside her. It wasn't a partnership anymore. It was a performance running on fumes. And that's why her smile, more than Harry's walkout, became the lasting image of that night. Because it captured the contradiction of Meghan Markle perfectly, a woman desperate to appear unbothered while quietly falling apart. But what makes this story truly fascinating is that while Meghan was trying to save face, her own team was losing control backstage. The real panic wasn't happening in front of the cameras. It was happening behind them. Assistants whispering, phones buzzing, publicists arguing over statements, people desperately trying to contact Harry's staff. The PR machine that had always worked in perfect sync was now glitching in real time. Because no amount of spin could fix what had just happened, millions had already seen it, analyzed it, judged it. And as Meghan took her seat inside the gala, the damage control war had already begun. She may have been smiling, but her team was unraveling. Because when a brand built on perfection starts to crack, the scramble to hold it together exposes even more of what's broken. And Meghan was about to find out that no amount of rehearsed charm could protect her from what was coming next. Because as the cameras moved away from her, the real chaos was just beginning. The whispers, the back and forth between her and her team, and the frantic effort to rewrite the story before it swallowed them whole. But this time, the story was writing itself. And what happened behind that red curtain, the part the cameras didn't catch, was far worse than what the public saw. Because if Meghan's smile broke in public, her composure shattered completely in private. And that's where the night took a turn no one could have predicted. What happened next would expose not just their relationship, but the fragile machinery behind their entire empire. And no one, not even Meghan herself, saw it coming. It started the second Meghan disappeared behind the curtain. The smiles, the laughter, the flickering camera flashes, all gone in an instant. The noise of the red carpet faded into a muffled hum, replaced by a cold, suffocating silence. Meghan stepped out of the spotlight and into chaos. Her team, polished, professional, and usually unflappable, was already in motion. Phones out, earpieces buzzing, whispered commands bouncing between assistants. But even they looked nervous. Because no one, not even the most experienced publicist, could spin what had just happened in real time. Prince Harry had walked off the red carpet, and Meghan Markle was left standing there, smiling alone. The moment she crossed into the backstage corridor, the mask dropped. That perfect Hollywood composure, that serene Duchess act, gone. She turned sharply to her senior aide, her tone tight, words clipped and deliberate. Witnesses described the air as ice cold. One insider later claimed she said, "Where is he?" Another said she muttered something more biting. "He's doing this on purpose." Whatever the words were, the message was clear. This wasn't confusion. It was fury. Because Meghan understood the stakes better than anyone. The entire night had been planned to the smallest detail. The press list, the lighting angles, even the carpet order, all of it meticulously curated to ensure maximum exposure with minimal unpredictability. And now, all of that had gone up in flames. Harry had broken the choreography. And when the choreography breaks, the performance collapses. Her team swarmed around her, offering explanations, excuses, damage control strategies. He probably needed air. We'll say he was called away for a moment. No one saw anything. Maybe it won't get picked up. But Meghan wasn't buying it. Because she knew the cameras had caught everything. She could feel it. That sixth sense she'd developed after years in the media storm. The ability to know when the narrative had slipped. And it had. "He's not coming back out, is he?" she asked one of her aides, voice low, almost calm but loaded with venom. The aide hesitated. "We're checking." It was the kind of pause that tells you everything you need to know. Meghan exhaled sharply, turned, and paced. Her heels echoed on the polished floor. One assistant held her clutch. Another handed her a phone. Her publicist was already fielding calls, tabloids, online outlets, gossip channels, all asking the same question. What just happened between them? And the irony? This was a mental health gala. The event's theme was authenticity in a modern world. Yet here they were, scrambling to fake authenticity faster than ever before. The Meghan machine was spinning at full speed. Within minutes, her team had drafted 3 possible explanations. Harry was pulled aside by event coordinators for a quick briefing. He felt unwell and stepped away momentarily. They had split their arrivals to greet different sections of the press. But none of those versions matched the footage already spreading across social media. The truth had outrun the spin. Across the internet, the clip of Harry walking off had already gone viral. On Twitter, #HarryWalksOut was trending within 15 minutes. TikTok creators were dissecting it frame by frame, adding dramatic captions and reaction cuts. The royal commentators, those who'd been waiting for a Sussex slip-up, were feasting on it. And Meghan knew it. That's when the panic turned to anger. Because for Meghan, bad optics weren't just inconvenient, they were catastrophic. Every time her image took a hit, it wasn't just gossip. It was power slipping away, influence fading, invitations disappearing. And now, thanks to Harry, she was the headline of humiliation. "Give me my phone," she said sharply. An aide handed it to her immediately. Her fingers moved fast, scrolling through notifications, messages from friends, PR contacts, reporters, even her mother. Some sympathetic, others asking for comment. She didn't answer any of them. Not yet. Instead, she took a deep breath and turned back toward the curtain separating her from the red carpet. You could tell she wanted to go back out there, to reclaim control, to rewrite the narrative in real time. But someone stopped her, an older publicist, calm and experienced. "Not yet," he said. "You'll make it worse." That was the trigger. Her composure cracked. "Worse? It's already worse." He walked out on me in front of the world. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter. Her team froze. For a brief moment. She wasn't the Duchess or the actress or the brand. She was just a woman blindsided in public. But then, just as quickly, she caught herself. Straightened her posture. Adjusted her hair. "Fine," she said. "Then we fix it." And that's exactly what she tried to do. The next phase of the Meghan Markle crisis manual kicked in, the PR pivot. Within half an hour, her digital team had already begun pushing alternate narratives online. Anonymous sources began tweeting that Harry had stepped away to handle a private call related to his mental health advocacy. Fan accounts posted glowing edits of Meghan greeting fans, emphasizing her grace under pressure. Hashtags shifted. Hashtag Meghan at the gala began trending alongside the original walkout clip. But the problem with spin is that once people sense it, they resist it. And the audience wasn't buying it this time. Commenters began pointing out inconsistencies. Funny how every time Meghan looks bad, her PR fires up immediately. You can tell they're scrambling. It's so obvious. Even more damaging, new angles of the walkout began surfacing. One showed Meghan turning her head slightly toward Harry before he walked off, lips parting as if mid-sentence. Viewers started lip-reading, claiming she said, "Harry, stay." Others swore she said, "You're embarrassing me." No one knew the truth. But the speculation was deadly. Meanwhile, Harry hadn't returned. According to insiders, he'd retreated to a quiet corner of the backstage area, speaking with one of his personal aides and refusing to rejoin the carpet. "He's done," the aide allegedly said to a staff member. "He doesn't want to be part of this circus tonight." And that's when panic turned into something worse, realization. Because Meghan's team could spin the footage all they wanted, but they couldn't spin him. Harry wasn't cooperating anymore. For the first time since leaving the royal family, the Sussex brand wasn't unified. Meghan's PR empire relied on synchronization, 2 people, 1 message. But now, the wires were crossed. And the entire operation was short-circuiting. "Should we cancel the press round?" one assistant whispered. "Or delay it?" "No," Meghan replied, voice cold but steady. "We go on." You could almost admire the determination, the performer refusing to break character, no matter how disastrous the act had become. But underneath that resolve, there was fear. Real fear. Because if Meghan showed weakness, if she pulled out or canceled, the story would explode tenfold. She needed to show the world that she was still in control, even if she wasn't. So she did what she always does. She leaned into the performance. When she re-emerged minutes later, the smile was back. The camera-ready version of Meghan had returned, polished and perfect. She greeted guests, posed with organizers, and nodded graciously during interviews. But to those who knew her well, the cracks were still visible. The smiles came too quickly. The laughter sounded forced. Her eyes flickered constantly toward the entrances, as if expecting Harry to reappear. He didn't. Inside the PR control room, a small media coordination tent at the edge of the venue, her team worked frantically. They coordinated with social media managers, fielded reporter inquiries, and filtered which images would be distributed to news agencies. No solo photos, one publicist instructed. Make sure only joint shots or smiling crowd images go out. But they couldn't stop the freelance photographers outside the official press pool. The raw images, Meghan smiling alone, Harry walking off mid-frame, were already circulating online. By the time the gala's first speaker took the stage, the Sussex team knew the battle was lost. The internet had written its own version of the story. And that's the thing about modern fame. Once the narrative escapes, it can't be called back. Meghan sat at her table, poised and composed, while her team silently unraveled around her. Some argued they should issue a statement immediately, others insisted on silence. One advisor said, "If we ignore it, it'll fade." Another replied, "It's not fading. It's trending worldwide." The irony of it all was suffocating. They were at a mental health gala, surrounded by messages of openness and authenticity. Yet every person in Meghan's circle was operating on panic mode, desperate to maintain a facade. It was no longer about truth. It was about damage limitation. And here's where things took an even darker turn. Harry's camp wasn't cooperating with Meghan's team. His own spokesperson refused to echo their narrative, saying only, "The Duke is fine." No comment. That silence spoke volumes. It suggested division. It confirmed the rumors. Backstage, one of Meghan's closest aides reportedly said under her breath, "This is the beginning of the end." But Meghan didn't hear it. Or maybe she pretended not to. She kept smiling, shaking hands, and sitting through speeches she wasn't listening to. Her phone buzzed nonstop, her publicist leaning in every few minutes with updates she didn't want. She just nodded and smiled. Because that's what she does. Because even when her world is burning down, Meghan Markle knows the power of pretending it isn't. But pretending can only last so long. Because by the end of the night, one thing became painfully clear. No matter how many press releases or spin campaigns her team launched, the story had already escaped them. And when a story escapes Meghan Markle's control, she doesn't sleep. She plots. Because in her world, perception isn't just protection, it's revenge. And as the curtain fell on that chaotic night, one thing was certain. Meghan wasn't going to let Harry's walkout define her. She was going to redefine it. But the way she tried to take back control would only make things worse. Much worse. Because when Meghan's team decided to fight back, they didn't just start a PR campaign. They started a war. And the fallout from that war would shake both the Sussex brand and their marriage to its core. What came next would turn a quiet embarrassment into a full-blown crisis. And no one, not even the palace, was ready for it. It was supposed to be just another appearance. Just another night of smiling for the cameras, shaking hands, and giving speeches about mental health. But for Prince Harry, that evening at the Project Healthy Minds Gala wasn't just another night. It was the breaking point. You could see it on his face before he even stepped onto the red carpet. The stiffness in his jaw, the lack of sparkle in his eyes, that distant, distracted look of someone who's been holding it together for far too long. He looked like a man torn between duty and exhaustion, between love and self-preservation. For years, Harry had been the man who followed his heart, the prince who gave up a throne for freedom, the husband who defied the monarchy for love. The world had cheered for him when he stood beside Meghan and declared independence from the firm. But now, 5 years later, that same man was standing under the blinding lights of another public spectacle. Only this time, it wasn't the crown controlling the performance. It was his wife. And that realization, it seems, finally broke him. Because what most people didn't see that night was that Harry had been spiraling quietly for weeks before the gala. Those close to him said he'd grown withdrawn, spending more time alone, less time in meetings, and even less time entertaining the endless PR grind that defined their lives. The very thing he'd fled, the constant need to maintain a perfect image, had followed him across the ocean, wrapped in a different kind of crown. And that's what made the Project Healthy Minds Gala so cruelly ironic. Here he was, the face of a movement for emotional honesty, being forced once again to fake it. From the moment the invitations went out, the pressure began building. Meghan saw the event as their redemption arc, a chance to silence critics, show unity, and remind the world that the Sussexes were still relevant, still powerful, still adored. But Harry didn't see redemption. He saw another cage. He had warned her weeks earlier that he didn't want another photo circus, that he wanted to focus on the cause, not the cameras. But Meghan's team, eager for press, pushed forward with full glam and full exposure. It's important, they said. It's good optics. And maybe that was the moment Harry realized the truth. Every cause, every speech, every event was no longer about the mission. It was about the moment. The photo, the brand, the performance. By the night of the gala, he was done pretending. Witnesses say Harry barely spoke on the way to the venue. Meghan filled the silence with media briefings, phone calls, and outfit adjustments. She talked about angles and lighting. He stared out the window. Their driver later recalled how Meghan checked her reflection in the car's mirror while Harry sat with his hands clasped tightly, eyes downcast. It was the silence of a man who'd already decided something and was just waiting for the right moment to act on it. When they arrived, the crowd cheered. Meghan lit up instantly, like a performer stepping onto stage. Harry smiled faintly, but it was mechanical, strained. He stayed a step behind her, letting her take the lead. Cameras flashed. She posed gracefully. He didn't. And that subtle rebellion, the refusal to play his part, was the spark that lit the fuse. As the flashes intensified, you could see it. The flicker of irritation in his eyes, the slight exhale through his nose, the clenched jaw when Meghan adjusted his stance for the 5th time. She whispered something, gesturing toward the photographers. He nodded reluctantly, forcing a tight grin. But then something changed. A journalist shouted a question about the royal family. Another shouted something about King Charles's health. Meghan froze, her smile stiffening. Harry's head turned sharply toward the voice. His expression darkened. That was the moment. The spark. He'd had enough. Enough of being used for clicks. Enough of watching the woman he loved turn every cause into a performance. Enough of reliving the same suffocating cycle of manipulation, image, and pretense. Only this time without the castle walls. He stepped back, took a breath, and walked off. No drama, no shouting, just quiet rebellion. For most people, it looked like a small act. But for Harry, it was monumental. Because for the first time since he'd left the royal family, he wasn't walking away from the institution. He was walking away from the performance, the one he and Meghan had built together. And the reaction backstage only confirmed how far gone he was. When he left the red carpet, one of the event coordinators reportedly followed him, asking if he was okay. Harry nodded but didn't stop. He walked down the hallway toward a quiet area reserved for VIPs, shoulders tense, eyes distant. He didn't yell. He didn't lash out. He just exhaled deeply, muttering, "I can't do this anymore." Those 6 words would echo throughout the night. He sat down on a bench, loosening his tie, rubbing the back of his neck like a man carrying the weight of 2 worlds. A security guard asked if he wanted water. He just nodded. When asked if he wanted to return to the carpet, he said softly, "Not yet." That's the thing about breaking points. They're quiet. They don't always come with explosions or tears. Sometimes, it's just a quiet surrender. And that night, Harry surrendered. Not to Meghan, not to the media, but to the truth that he'd been avoiding for months. That his idea of freedom and her idea of fame were never the same. While Meghan was orchestrating smiles, Harry was counting exits. And when he walked away from that carpet, he wasn't just avoiding cameras. He was escaping a script he no longer wanted to read. Inside sources later revealed that Harry had been pulling back for months. He'd stopped attending some of Meghan's planned appearances, citing schedule conflicts. He'd canceled interviews, distanced himself from certain projects, and grown noticeably more private. Even his friends noticed the change. He seemed sad, one said, like he realized too late that the life he built isn't the one he wanted. And yet, here's the painful irony. Harry didn't want to embarrass Meghan. That's never who he was. But the truth has a way of slipping out, no matter how tightly you try to hide it. When he walked off that carpet, it wasn't defiance. It was fatigue. But fatigue can be just as destructive as fury. Because Meghan's reaction, her visible panic, her frantic attempts to hold it together, only confirmed his worst fear, that everything around them had become a show. Later that night, as they sat at their table inside the gala, people noticed they barely spoke. Meghan kept her posture perfect, smiling at the right moments, laughing at speeches, posing for photos. Harry, meanwhile, stared ahead, expression blank. One attendee described it as uncomfortable to watch. It was the silence between them that told the story. A silence thicker than any argument. And the saddest part? This was an event about mental health, about honesty, vulnerability, connection. But the couple who'd built an empire on those very words looked anything but connected. Harry's breaking point didn't come from hatred. It came from heartbreak, from realizing that the freedom he'd sacrificed everything for had turned into another kind of prison. He'd left behind the royal palace only to find himself trapped in a palace of perception. Every smile rehearsed, every word weighed, every gesture analyzed. He thought leaving the monarchy meant freedom. But freedom, he'd learned, wasn't about escaping a title. It was about escaping performance. And standing beside Meghan on that carpet, under the flashes and the whispers, he realized something devastating. He wasn't free at all. So he walked, not to make a statement, not to humiliate her, but because in that moment, staying felt like lying, to himself, to her, to the message they claimed to stand for. And maybe that's what makes it so human. Because even a prince, stripped of his titles, dressed in a designer suit, surrounded by power and fame, can still feel utterly trapped. What came after his walkout wasn't peace. It was fallout. Because Harry's quiet rebellion didn't just crack their public image, it detonated it. The headlines exploded within hours. Analysts called it the red carpet rebellion. Commentators debated whether it was symbolic. Some claimed it was a message to Meghan. Others said it was a cry for help. But one thing was certain. This wasn't a simple case of a husband storming off. It was the culmination of years of tension, misalignment, and emotional exhaustion. And what makes it tragic is that Meghan didn't see it that way. To her, it was betrayal. She saw his silence not as honesty, but as sabotage. And by the time the night was over, that silent act of defiance had spiraled into a confrontation that no one could stop. Because when the cameras went down, Meghan didn't hold back. And what she said to him after the gala, what witnesses heard behind closed doors, would push the couple past the point of no return. The red carpet had broken Harry. But backstage, Meghan's fury would break the silence. And that's where the night turned from awkward to explosive. Because when words finally replaced silence, they cut deeper than any headline ever could. And the fallout from that confrontation would leave everyone, staff, guests, even insiders, wondering if this was the moment the fairy tale finally ended. But what happened in that private hallway, away from the cameras, would reveal just how fractured their partnership had become. And the truth of that moment would make even their harshest critics pause in disbelief. Because this wasn't just a walkout. It was a warning. And what Meghan did next would ensure there was no going back. The second the curtain fell between Meghan Markle and the flashing cameras, the world outside kept smiling. But backstage, everything broke wide open. The room wasn't silent anymore. It was buzzing, muffled voices, the whir of cell phones, the sound of heels striking marble. Assistants rushed around like anxious bees, trying to manage the chaos without knowing what they were even managing. And right in the middle of it stood Meghan, frozen, breath tight, eyes blazing. She wasn't angry in the way most people imagine. Not yet. This wasn't screaming or flailing. This was something colder, controlled, sharp. The kind of anger that simmers instead of explodes. The kind that cuts deeper because it's quiet. And then she said it. Low, precise, enough to make every assistant in earshot stop moving. Where is he? One aide tried to stammer an answer. Another gestured vaguely toward the back corridor, where Harry had disappeared minutes earlier. Meghan's gaze followed the direction like a laser. Get him, she said. Now. The command wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of authority. The same tone she used on set during Suits, the same tone she'd perfected in palace halls. Her people moved. While they scurried, Meghan stood perfectly still. Her fingers brushed the fabric of her gown, smoothing it out, not because it needed it, but because she needed to do something. Anything. She took a breath, closed her eyes. The smile returned for a fleeting moment, a survival instinct, before vanishing again. Minutes later, one of her aides returned. He's in the service hall, they whispered, sitting alone. Meghan nodded once and started walking. The staff who saw her pass through that narrow corridor later described the moment as tense enough to silence a room. The sound of her heels echoed down the hallway, each step deliberate, sharp, slicing through the quiet hum of the backstage area. And then, at the far end of the hallway, Near an emergency exit, she saw him. Prince Harry, sitting on a bench, tie loosened, head in his hands. He didn't look up when she approached. Didn't move. Didn't speak. For a second, Meghan just stood there, watching him. The man she'd fought kingdoms for, now sitting in silence like a stranger. "Harry," she said finally. No response. She took another step closer. What was that out there? Still nothing. Just the slow rise and fall of his breathing. "Harry, talk to me." She pushed, her tone sharper now. "You just walked off. In front of everyone. Do you understand what that looks like?" He finally looked up. His eyes were tired, the way someone looks when they've run out of words. "It looks honest," he said. The words hit her like ice water. "Honest?" she repeated, incredulous. "You think walking out in front of the cameras, in the middle of our photo op, was honest?" "Yes," he said, voice calm, almost too calm. "Because I can't pretend anymore." Meghan blinked, taken aback. "Pretend?" "Harry, we weren't pretending. We were performing," he interrupted, his voice rising now. "That's all we do, Meghan. We perform. Every single time." The hallway fell silent again. Even the assistants hovering nearby pretended to check their phones to avoid eye contact. Meghan crossed her arms, defensive. This was important. We were representing something bigger than us. The cause, the message. Harry stood up abruptly. "The message," he said, his voice filled with quiet disbelief. "You mean the image? The photos? The articles? The hashtags? It's never about the cause anymore, Meghan. It's about how we look talking about it." She shook her head. "That's not fair." "No," he said. "It's not fair. None of it has been fair. I left my family, my country, my life, for this. For you. And now it feels like I traded one prison for another." Those words hung in the air like smoke. You could see Meghan's expression shift, first shock, then hurt, then defiance. "You think I'm your prison?" she whispered. Harry didn't answer right away. He looked down at the floor. "I think I lost myself trying to be your partner," he said softly. "And I don't know who I am anymore." For a split second, the air felt heavy enough to collapse the ceiling. Meghan stepped closer, her voice trembling with controlled anger. "You're tired, Harry. You're emotional. Don't do this here. We'll talk later." "There's no later," he said, meeting her eyes. "There's only this." The emotion in his voice, that raw, exhausted sincerity, was something no one had heard from him in years. Not in interviews. Not on camera. This was the man behind the prince. And Meghan hated it. Not because she didn't care, but because she couldn't control it. She couldn't manage it, direct it, edit it. That's when she turned. "Fine," she said. "If you want to make this about you, go ahead. But you embarrassed me tonight. You embarrassed us. Do you have any idea what people are saying right now?" Harry gave a small, sad smile. "They're saying what they've always said," he murmured. "That you care about headlines more than people." That stung. Meghan's eyes flickered, her composure faltering. "That's not true." "Then prove it," he said quietly. "Stop chasing the cameras." The silence that followed felt like a void. Neither of them moved. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound between them. Then Meghan broke it, not with words, but with a sigh. "You're tired," she said again, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Let's just get through tonight. Please." But Harry didn't nod. He didn't reach for her. He just looked at her. The kind of look that says everything words can't. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he said finally. For the first time that night, Meghan's expression changed. The fire dimmed. The actress dropped her mask. For a fleeting moment, she looked afraid. "Don't say that," she whispered. But he didn't take it back. Because for Harry, that wasn't an outburst. It was a confession. A crack in the wall that had been holding back years of quiet resentment. And maybe Meghan sensed it too. That this wasn't just a bad night or a public embarrassment. This was a turning point. Because after that moment, something between them changed. The air was different. The trust, that fragile thing they'd clung to through exile, criticism, and fame, had splintered. Witnesses backstage described how Meghan and Harry walked back into the main event separately. Meghan straightened her posture, reapplied her smile, and slipped back into the crowd like nothing had happened. Harry followed 10 minutes later, expression unreadable, hands in his pockets. They didn't sit together for the speeches. They didn't exchange a glance during dinner. To the audience, it looked like a simple seating adjustment. But to those who'd seen what happened behind the curtain, it looked like the beginning of a separation, not physical, but emotional. And as they left the gala later that night, something eerie happened. For the first time ever, Meghan walked ahead, and Harry didn't follow. There was no hand-holding, no synchronized smiles. Just distance. The photographers caught it, of course. And by morning, the photos were everywhere. The Duchess in front, the Prince trailing behind. Headlines called it the cold walk. But the truth behind those images was darker than anyone imagined. Because what started as a walkout had turned into a confrontation, and what came after that confrontation would send the Sussex team into meltdown.